Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. Welcome to this week's edition of Kibbitzing with Kagan, brief conversations with people I find fascinating. So we have just adjourned from a 90-day legislative session that was super stressful. For those of you who are listening on Apple, envision that I'm wearing a beautiful pantsuit with a silk blouse. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, I'm in a green sweatshirt, and that's the best I could do because I'm still catching up on sleep. So I'm doing green for the environment, but that's the best I can do. And I put on lipstick. So that's what I got. My wonderful guest today is one of my very favorite lobbyists, Jamie DeMarco, who has been working in energy and the environment for a very long time. Jamie, thank you so much for taking time to kibitz today.
It is an honor to be on the show with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So I have to start at the very, very beginning, which is I think it's awesome that you were born on Election Day, 1992, the day that Bill Clinton was elected. And I've known your parents for forever and stuff. Uh, was that symbolic? Did that start your trajectory of politics and policy?
It's true. I was born the day Bill Clinton was elected. It was a great day for both my parents. They were excited about both things.
Yes.
There's a funny story where I now work with Len Lucci in the
Nice.
legislature, and I met Len Lucci the day that I was born because my dad left my mom's bedside to go to a celebration party and came back with Len to
And
show off
and
his
Vinny and
born
Molly are still married, even though
day.
he left the
They made it
hospital?
through that. Yeah.
That's hilarious. For those who may not be lucky enough to know Len, as I have for decades, he is a longtime advocate for Prince George's County and others, and a really good guy. All right. So you grew up in Baltimore. You went to high school there. You were in the mock trial team and ran track. And then you got your BS in chemistry and environmental studies at Warren Wilson College. Talk about your early years of education and activism.
Yeah, and we won state championships my senior year in mock trial, so I am still
Yes.
proud about that. My life growing up, as far as I could tell, the world was pretty hunky-dory for most of my childhood. It was really not until my senior year of college when I had my high school girlfriend tell me like, "Hey, Jamie, the lives we live come at the cost of people and places all over the world," that
Mm,
I became passionate about trying to make the world a better place, inspired by both my parents as well, of course. But
yes.
I was lucky enough for most of my childhood growing up in Baltimore to be able to just focus on the things I loved, which include running and acting and rock climbing and lots of other things.
Awesome. So before we get to you, one more thing on your folks. Your dad, Vinny, whom I've known since 1981, which is insane, is a really effective advocate on healthcare and drug prices and stuff in Annapolis. How much of that sort of is an advantage or disadvantage as you started your career and in Annapolis?
I am really lucky for both of my parents and the family I was raised in. My dad, especially, is an advocate in Annapolis, which of course is the field that I am now in.
Yep.
What I've learned most from him is I've learned so much from him, but most especially how to be effective and diligent and work hard and accomplish things while also having a really good time and having so much fun, so much connection with so many other people. And the way that joy and power go together, I think is an exemplary lesson that I've learned from him.
I love that. I love that. So much of your career was at CCAN, the Chesapeake Climate Action Network, which is a really visible and effective presence in Annapolis. You were there for more than 5 years, starting as a fellow and ending as federal policy director. Talk about what you learned there and what you're proudest of having accomplished.
Yeah, like you said, first interned at the Chesapeake Climate Action Network in 2015. So I've been in and around their spaces for a long time. They're still a client. So in some respects, I still work there.
Yes.
I am really proud of, along with the Chesapeake Climate Action Network I guess it was 2017, we made a plan to pass the Clean Energy Jobs Act of 2019, which remains Maryland's sort of landmark clean
Yep.
energy legislation, requiring the state to have 50% clean energy by 2030. And we laid out a 2-year plan with lots of interim steps for how to achieve that, starting with building a big coalition, making an election issue, and going and winning it. following the six-step model that my father pioneered for passing legislation in Annapolis. He has a sort of six-step approach.
Go
Uh,
ahead. Do that
and
if you can give us a few highlights, even if you can't come up with all six.
oh no, this is a good test. Let's see. So one is develop a policy and community-informed plan. Two is build a really big coalition around it and get as many endorsers as possible. Three is do some really robust polling on it, I think is
Okay.
polling. Then take it to the media, tell your narrative. Don't just keep it in your bubble, share, share, share. Five
Yes.
is make it an election issue. In an election, ask every candidate, would you commit to supporting this policy? Yes
Yep.
or no, and support the ones who do. And then in six is go and win in the legislature the year following the election.
I love that. And I'm very aware that he has done those things. I never knew it was a six-step plan. That's very cool.
So
So,
we laid out that plan for the Clean Energy Jobs Act in 2017, and then we doggedly pursued it and
yes,
exceeded our goals in every step and passed the law in 2019. The one piece we missed in 2019 was taking trash out of the renewable portfolio standard.
yes.
At long last has happened this legislature.
Yay, we got done this year. Let's talk about the coalition for a second. When people think about environmental groups, they don't think about CCAN, the Chesapeake Climate Action Network. They think about the Sierra Club or the League of Conservation Voters. How, and certainly, and Thousand Friends of Maryland, and I know there are a million others. How much do you guys work together versus compete for dollars, money, membership, visibility?
Yeah, we are obviously strongest when we are working together in a coalition, and a
Yes.
coalition not just of, LCV, CCAN, Sierra Club, and the other climate groups, but also when we can bring in ratepayer advocates, when we can bring in environmental justice frontline organizations, when we can bring in labor unions. What I've found is that when we have those broader coalitions activated and united, we can be successful. But when we are all sort of in our silos and maybe pursuing our own interests and not each other's and not working together, that is when our legislation tends to fail.
True, true. Um, Gosh, so many things. Uh, so let's talk about the Climate Solutions Now Act. That was a big accomplishment. Why don't you summarize that for people who might not
Yeah.
be familiar with it?
In 2022, the Maryland General Assembly passed the Climate Solutions Now Act, which was inspired by the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act passed in New York a few years earlier. The first and most important thing it did was, for the first time, set a legislative mandate that the state achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions. There are a lot of consequences, both in regulation and in policy and in other areas, that are positively impacted by just putting on the books. Like, our goal is to get off fossil fuels. Our goal is to solve this problem, not
Let's
just
define what a fossil fuel is.
yeah, good point. A fossil fuel is coal, oil, and gas, things that became fossils and can now be burned and emit carbon dioxide in the atmosphere when we burn them, contributing to the climate crisis. So one of the most important things the bill did is just say our goal is to have, be sucking as much carbon dioxide out of the air every year as we're putting in, which can only be done by almost entirely, if not entirely, getting off of fossil fuels.
Right. Which is
The
hard.
Yeah, it is not an easy thing to do.
Right.
There are a lot of success stories and we're moving in the right direction. Maryland has been really successful in reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. We have a long way to go, but
Yes.
thanks to the leadership of the Legislative General Assembly of Maryland, we have made a lot of progress. Other things that the Climate Solutions Now Act of 2022 did include establishing building energy performance standards, which required improvements to energy efficiency in large buildings. It also acknowledged the fact that to solve the climate crisis, we need to electrify everything. And Maryland has had a program called Empower that was focused on reducing electricity usage. And its metrics of success were based on reduction in electricity consumption. But we know that as we electrify everything, including transportation and space heating, our electricity use is actually going to go up. So the Climate Solutions Now Act changed the metric of success from that program from reducing electricity to reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay. Let's talk I think we shouldn't overlook fracking, hydraulic fracturing, which is now seems like 100 years ago that we banned that. why don't you talk about fracking? Because it was a big issue in the 2024 presidential election in Pennsylvania, and it's still a big issue in lots of other states.
Yeah, Maryland thankfully has banned the practice of hydraulic fracturing in Maryland, which is terrific news. Without this ban, we think that there would be fracking wells in Western Maryland today.
Okay, let's say what it is.
A fracking well is, fracking is short for hydraulic fracturing.
Right.
And it's think of an oil well. It's essentially an oil well, but they have the ability to drill horizontally and they fracture the rock. And there's lots of runoff from the
To get to coal.
that are used.
To get to coal, which we don't want to use anymore, and it really degrades the land and the environment.
Yeah, it is very bad for the environment. And everyone who enjoys clean waterways in Western Maryland is grateful that fracking is banned in Maryland. And that was a big fight.
Yes, it was.
Back on that, I actually got arrested in an act of civil disobedience, calling on the governor to support a fracking ban. We were on the news, and then the next day he came out in support of banning.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. So Larry Hogan had, in my opinion, a pretty bad environmental record, but he came on board with fracking. And so I give credit where credit is due.
But like all things Larry Hogan, he only came on board once the
Yes.
legislature was about to do it.
Yes,
Larry Hogan
yes.
was the master of sort of standing at the finish line and then holding the hand of whoever crossed the finish line and saying, "We did it,"
Yeah.
when he wasn't actually anywhere to be seen on the track to
No,
get
he took credit for all the stuff we did, except
there.
anyway. So
He
you might.
vetoed. It was ridiculous.
I was just going to say, you biked 400 miles almost with your dad about renewable energy in 2016, and that was a Larry Hogan protest.
Yeah, so the first Clean Energy Jobs Act, the Clean Energy Jobs Act 2015, Governor Larry Hogan vetoed it. He vetoed it. And then, my father and I had what we called the Ride for the Override, where we rode across the entire state of Maryland,
Love.
at places and talking about the benefits of the clean energy economy. And we got a lot of press. We got Washington Post articles out of it. And the next legislative session, the General Assembly came back and overrode Governor Hogan's veto. But then,
Yes, yeah.
swear to you, another time, Governor Larry Hogan said he was very proud of the state's clean energy goals that he had vetoed, and his veto was overridden. But he was very proud of them.
Yeah. There are no words. That's not the only issue he did that with. Offshore wind. Why do people dislike it so much, and why is it important?
I like offshore wind. Offshore wind is important because it can bring good union jobs in a way that few other industries can. I grew up in Baltimore, and during my childhood, the last job left Bethlehem Steel, which used to be one of the largest, if not the largest, steel factory in the world. Even it was the beast of the East. All those jobs left, and obviously the deindustrialization of Baltimore has had a big impact on the region and on the city. Thanks to offshore wind and legislation that senators like yourself and other members of the General Assembly have passed, union jobs are on the verge of coming back to Baltimore. Union steel manufacturing jobs, specifically because of offshore wind. That Sparrows Point Steel has a contract between U.S. Wind and United Steelworkers to have a factory that has hundreds of union workers working to manufacture the pieces of offshore wind. And bringing that kind of manufacturing to our state and to Baltimore is key. And offshore wind can provide a great offset to solar. And there's enough energy off the East Coast to power the East Coast if we fully tap it.
Okay. Since we were talking about Larry Hogan and now we have Governor Wes Moore, talk about how different or how not different with a super Democratic majority of mostly environmentalists, how different to have a Democratic governor than a Republican one.
Oh, it's been night and day. It has been so great to have Governor Moore leading our climate goals and pushing the state forward. And particularly on offshore wind, he sort of set the goal of 8.5 gigawatts of offshore wind. That's enough offshore wind if we get it built to meet the energy needs of every home in Maryland today. So that is just a really ambitious goal that he has put out there, and his administration has worked with us to help pass these offshore wind pieces of legislation that is jumpstarting this industry. Obviously, now we have an offshore wind opponent at the federal level in the White House who is working to undo the progress that we've made and could cost Maryland these jobs potentially, if he's able to block the progress we've made, but we think that project is moving forward.
Well, I was going to get to this later, but since you referenced what I call the Trump-Musk administration, what is the worst thing they've done so far on the environment or energy? And what is your biggest fear?
Yeah, I mean, they are just running an unconstitutional scam at the federal level. I mean, just this week, they issued an executive order attacking states' ability to tackle the climate crisis. So the United States is a federation and we have state government and federal government. And his executive order, if you read it, is really scary. And he's directing his attorney general to sue states that have pursued action to address climate change, taking away states' rights. It's clear that his administration doesn't care about states' rights and will use that as a cudgel when it's politically beneficial and throw it out the window when it's not politically beneficial. And he also recently issued an executive order trying to keep all coal plants that are currently operating from shutting down.
Yes.
But I think potentially the biggest damage he's doing is to offshore wind, where we don't, as a state, we cannot cite offshore wind. That is something that is done through the federal government. And unfortunately, the Trump administration has sort of paused all new leasing for offshore wind, and the industry can move forward with projects that are currently moving forward that are leased and have all their federal permits. But he is sort of trying to kill this industry entirely, which is terrible for jobs and for our climate and for our air.
Wow. There are, shockingly, despite the fires, floods, hurricanes, torrential rains, destruction that we see all around the country, there are still Americans who don't believe in the climate crisis. What do you say to persuade them, or do you even try? How do you talk to or work with people like that?
Yeah, I mean, there are people who are unpersuadable and who it's not a good use of your time to talk to, but there's a lot of people who are persuadable. And it's good to just talk to every person as an individual. I found that more than like any argument, a human connection is what brings someone around. And so if you are trying to like argue with someone on the internet, that's why it so often doesn't go well, because you have no relationship to that person. But if you can find some way to connect with them and build a bond, or find someone who has a bond who can be a better messenger, that is the better way to getting people than any statistic you could share.
Good. Gosh, so many more questions. Let's talk about green, my bill that has passed 4 times through the Senate and keeps getting killed in the House inexplicably. The green and renewable energy for nonprofits. It creates a revolving loan fund so that nonprofits who need to put their money into their mission could actually get an interest-free loan, putting up just 10% of the cost so that they can get solar panels or whatever's the right renewable energy for them in order to be part of the climate solutions. You have been such a great messenger on that. Make the case in a way that I seem incapable of doing.
And thank you for your leadership on the Green Act. This legislation is really important. We're thrilled it's passed the Senate. We are looking forward to getting it across the finish line one of these sessions, hopefully next session. But for so much of the clean energy revolution, it is an access to capital problem. The clean energy solutions cost less on an operating basis. Solar has no fuel cost, energy efficiency, it reduces your energy costs, but all of these things take money to install.
Yes.
As Saul Griffith from Rewiring America says, we are one low interest rate away from the clean revolution. And so by providing nonprofits, organizations that tend to lack access to capital, with access to zero interest loans, you catalyze a series of beneficial climate actions that are otherwise unlocked. Actions that are going to pay for themselves over time, but people don't have the upfront money to invest in, and that are going to put more money back in the pockets of our mission-driven nonprofits that are going to reduce our emissions and benefit all of us by reducing demand on the grid through solar deployment and energy efficiency. We all benefit from this. It just really is an important piece of legislation to move forward.
Yes. Thank you. And I love telling people that when I told my congressman, Jamie Raskin, about the program or about my bill, he thought it was so great. He got it put into the a federal infrastructure plan, and there started being two programs at the federal level for public schools and for nonprofits. So makes me crazy.
You've had success at the federal level before you've had success in the.
Right? Right? That's bananas.
Well,
Um,
congrats on your national impact.
Thank you. Thank you. So, we've been spending a lot of our time talking about what we do at the state level. Let's go down and up. So, we were talking about the federal level. Certainly, regional challenges. If Maryland does everything perfectly on wind and solar and conservation and all that, that doesn't help the Bay in Virginia, Pennsylvania, DC, New Jersey. How well do you see things going in the regional level?
Yeah, I mean, climate impacts are something that we used to talk about, we used to project about, we used to estimate around, but they're happening now. And you look at Annapolis is spending close to $100 million to update its dock because of
Yes.
chronic flooding caused by sea level rise. You can
Hmm.
look at places all around the state, public schools that never used to need air conditioning because it never
Mm.
got so hot in
Hmm.
September and in June. But now it is no longer safe to send kids to school on some September and June days without air conditioning. So they're having to renovate and install new HVAC systems. That is a cost that is coming
HVAC
out.
is heating, ventilation, and air conditioning.
Thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
Those costs are borne by taxpayers. That's coming out of the state budget. If you look at Ellicott City, who experienced two once in a
In
thousand year
Howard County. Hmm.
within the span of 2 years, they were hit by two once in a thousand year rain events, and they are spending upwards of $200 million
Mm.
to build an 18-foot diameter drainage tunnel through granite bedrock to handle stormwater runoff. These are
Right.
all costs we are currently bearing.
Yes.
All of those who pay taxes pay for the impacts of climate change.
Yes.
And it's important that we shift that burden from taxpayers to the fossil fuel companies who knew and lied about the crisis.
But let's be clear, though, if Maryland and our counties and municipalities are doing all these important mitigation work, what about Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, who doesn't want to acknowledge it? What about, other states' leaders who aren't taking action?
Yeah, there are other places that aren't taking action. And to be clear, Virginia is still taking a lot of action. Virginia passed the Virginia Clean Economy Act that is requiring 100% clean electricity for the state, has taken other actions like also opting into clean cars.
Okay, I don't want to brag about Virginia.
Okay.
I think Youngkin has also not been
Yeah,
enough.
Youngkin has held them back, but luckily leaders
Yes,
in the legislature have had their victories and
fair.
passed. Maryland is way ahead, to be clear.
Okay, okay. Um, you referenced Annapolis and Ellicott City, but you may not know this, but I'm very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. So, without the crisis part, without the floods and the docks that are overloaded, what can municipalities be doing, or what should they be doing?
Well, first of all, the costs of climate change are being borne everywhere that has
Yes.
a stormwater drainage system. So
Hmm.
if you have pipes designed to handle stormwater, those pipes were built for a certain level of precipitation that is no longer relevant to the heavier precipitation events we're now getting. So these costs are being felt everywhere,
Yes.
including in in Gaithersburg and Rockville. But municipalities can take a lot of actions. Montgomery County has established its own building energy performance standards.
Yes.
It can also, make procurements of renewable energy that can save the county money over time.
Hmm.
And some municipalities like Montgomery County and Howard County have moved forward with policies to require new buildings to be all electric. And there's a lot of great action that can be taken at the local level, particularly, I think, around walkability and improving public transit.
Okay. So I want to pivot. You decided to leave CCAN full time, the Chesapeake Climate Action Network, and open up your own firm, DeMarco Advocacy. I have said, you've heard me say it many times, I just think you're an incredibly effective lobbyist. So say a couple of tips, maybe for a grassroots civic person, someone who just cares about something in their community or in Annapolis. You've talked about the 6 steps that your dad did, but what's something that a tip that you think makes you effective in Annapolis?
Oh, that is a great question. I think staying focused with specific goals, and having your goals be measurable, sort of time-bound and specific, and then working backwards from those goals is really helpful. We all have issues that we care about, but when you talk with stakeholders or with elected officials about an issue in general, it's easy to have a meandering conversation that doesn't have takeaways. But when you know exactly what you want to accomplish, and if you're working with others to accomplish that, you can have a lot more success. The director of the Chesapeake Climate Action Network likes to say the two keys to a successful campaign are: one, build the biggest coalition possible, and two, never, ever, ever, ever give up.
I love that. That's good. You started your own podcast recently, Maryland Energy Talk, and have had conversations at a pretty high, sophisticated level, and yet that are also accessible to policy geeks. How do you decide which guests you choose?
It's true. Maryland Energy Talk. It is a great podcast if you are interested in learning more about legislation relating to energy in Maryland, in Annapolis, which I admit is a small niche. But for the people who are into it, we're really into it. The question I always ask myself is, what is something that I think lawmakers and their staff in Annapolis are hearing about, but would benefit from getting the full story around in a way that is hard to convey in any way other than an hour-long conversation? A lot of this information, I think staff like Google these questions and find lots of confusing results. It's hard to get these sort of deep dives specifically in a way that's relevant to Maryland.
Yes.
And that's the information that I really want to provide. And I found that the ones that provide needed, timely information get a lot more listens.
Nice. Okay. We're going to start to wrap up. If you were not doing energy and environmental issues, what else interests you? What else are your passions?
A part of me always thinks that in another universe, I would be a middle school science teacher because I love working with kids.
Yeah.
I love teaching and I love the sort of sciences. I think that would be another great life.
I love that. Okay. Any goals? I know this is an obnoxious question. We just wrapped up this session, the 2025 session. Have you allowed yourself to think about goals for the 2026 session yet?
Yeah, I have. And my big thought is that we need to defend the progress we've made because we have a lot of really great regulations and policies on the books, like building energy performance standards, like clean cars, clean trucks, and zero emission heating equipment standards. These are all policies that Maryland is moving forward with, but that the polluters and the industries are trying to attack and undermine. So I'm kind of in a let's defend what we've got mindset.
Okay. And speaking of what we've got, I really was irresponsible by not starting with what was the biggest thing that you were excited about that we passed this year?
This year, I am really excited that Maryland General Assembly passed the first steps of the RENEW Act. RENEW stands for Responding to Emergency Needs from Extreme Weather. The goal of this legislation ultimately is to take the burden of adapting to climate change off of taxpayers and put it on international fossil fuel giant companies. And the first step of doing that is measuring and estimating how much climate change is costing Maryland. And the next step will be making those companies pay a portion of that amount to Maryland.
Okay. All right. It is time for the Fast Five, unless there's something that I haven't asked you that you are dying to add really briefly here.
I just want to say really briefly that I want to especially thank our sponsors of the RENEW Act, Senator Hester, Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, and Delegate Boafo.
Great. I love that. Okay. So Jamie DeMarco Advocacy, working on energy issues, primarily in the environment. It is time for your Fast Five. 5 quick questions, 5 quick answers. So, question number 1. What is the easiest one small thing that any Marylander could do that would make a difference on the environment?
Call your lawmaker.
Okay. Question number 2. Who is an icon, a shero or hero, making a difference on the environment, past or present?
Someone who I consistently follow and look up to has been Bill McKibben. His writings got me into this space. He said he had a great message that if the 5% of the population who cares most about this issue eliminated their own carbon footprint, that would be replaced by growth in a short number of years. But if that 5% became as politically engaged as possible, we would transform the world. And that has helped me get to where I am.
Love that. Question 3. You do a lot of hiking and biking. What are the 3 favorite places to hike in Maryland?
The hike I do every day is around Lake Artemisia, which is in College Park, Maryland, is where I walk my dog. It's a beautiful lake and a beautiful walk every day.
I have done that. Yes.
Oh, yeah, it is.
I have.
There every day. The Billy Goat Trail is a really
Nice.
wonderful trail. I have good memories of there at every stage in life. And then I grew up attending Catoctin Quaker Camp out in Catoctin, Maryland. That's where I met my wife at Quaker
Aw,
Camp. And the hiking around there is really good as well.
lovely. And you know what? I didn't say Senator Paul Pinsky, my former chair, Climate Solutions Now Act. I feel like we can't wrap up without saying Paul Pinsky.
Yeah, and Delegate Dana Stein was the House crossfile who did a great job of enacting that legislation.
Excellent. Question number 4. What do you do to relax, especially now that we've just gotten back from sessions? Something we haven't talked about yet.
I, one, enjoy going for walks around Lake Artemisia, like I
Yeah,
said.
no, 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 no. Something we haven't talked about yet. Give us something different.
I enjoy stretching and doing yoga in my house whenever possible. Free form. I don't like watching the videos as much. I've sort of done some in the past and enough to like have some basics that I can go through, and that's always centering.
Okay. All right. That feels redundant. So let me ask you, what's your favorite junk food?
Uh,
That's a better
um,
one.
yeah, okay. My favorite junk food is pizza. I love to just get a Domino's pizza. You can get a large pizza for $7.90.
Domino's. Domino's.
I'm a
Okay.
vegan, and so I don't get cheese on it, but I still get it, and
Okay. All
it's
right. All right. Quite the last question. Jamie DeMarco, the question that I ask every one of my guests. What is your hidden secret superpower? What's a skill or talent you have, something you're really good at that most folks can't do?
I am really good at not eating for a long period of time as part of a fast. I've gone in the past 7 days without eating any food as a fast that I was doing. And it's another thing that I do if I'm feeling really stressed and need to sort of spiritually reset uh,
Wow.
to fast.
Wow. But you take in liquid.
Yes, I always drink water. Always.
Okay. Wow. I might have to hear about that some other time, but not on this podcast. But Jamie DeMarco, thank you for your voice. Thank you for your strategic engagement and your effective leadership on issues that really are going to mean life and death for people and our planet and everything on it. So great to see you. Great to work with you. Thanks for coming to Kibitz today.
Thank you for your great representation of your constituents and all Marylanders. It's an honor to be on.
Thank you. See you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.